Trump stands in the Capitol before his swearing-in ceremony on January 20th. By Win McNameeGetty Images. It's easy enough to catalog the ways in which the first year of Donald Trump's presidency has been static. No major legislative accomplishment, most strikingly, no repeal of Obamacare, and no replacement to provide insurance for everybody, no beautiful border wall, no $1 trillion infrastructure program, a sweeping ban on travelers from Muslim countries that has repeatedly been blocked by the courts, and a tax cut for businesses that's anything but certain. It is much harder, however, to summarize and analyze the profound ways in which Trump, simply by occupying the Oval Office, has changed the culture of the presidency and the American political system's relation to it, changes that already seem likely to outlast his tenure, whether it be 4 or 8 years. It's risky to describe anything as unprecedented, but it's safe to say that the nation has never experienced a whirlwind quite like the first 10 months of the Trump administration. Since the earthquake of his election a year ago, Trump has repeatedly reduced 228 years of constitutional history to 140-character explosions of government by tweet and policy by peak. Presidents from Teddy Roosevelt to Harry Truman have often led with their chins. Seldom has any chief executive led so unself-consciously, at all hours of day and night, with his unfettered id. The long-term consequences of this style of presidential leadership remain to be judged. But the short-term impact seems clear enough. Intentionally or not, Trump has diminished public faith in all the important institutions of American life: law enforcement, the judiciary, the scientific establishment, the media, and the presidency itself. Not for nothing, his job approval ratings hover in the high 30% range, an all-time low. He has worked hard to portray the government he heads as hopelessly broken, so why should people expect that he might lead it effectively? In short order, he has plowed through and cast aside 1 chief of staff, 1 national security advisor, 1 FBI director, 1 press secretary, 1 communications director, 1 chief strategist, and 1 cabinet officer, just to name a few. He has challenged his Secretary of State, who reportedly called him a moron, to an IQ duel, repeatedly attacked his Attorney General, and suggested that only time will tell whether he keeps his job, derided the justice system as a joke and a laughingstock, and made plain his irritation that he cannot function as judge, jury, and executioner rolled into one. "You know, the saddest thing is that because I'm the President of the United States, I am not supposed to be involved with the Justice Department," Trump said last week. "I'm not supposed to be involved with the FBI. I'm not supposed to be doing the kind of things I would love to be doing. And I'm very frustrated by it, whether he knows it or not. That's just what the Founding Fathers intended, and Trump is hardly the first chief executive to chafe at limits on his power. He is, by most lights, however, the first to suggest so openly and insistently that efforts by the other branches of government to check his authority are illegitimate on their face. Whether in the case of Franklin D. Roosevelt's efforts to pack the Supreme Court, or Richard Nixon's willingness to defy a special prosecutor's investigation of Watergate, history suggests that such presidential resistance is never a winning course. More than 40 years after the historian Arthur Schlesinger bemoaned the rise of an imperial presidency, Trump's sheer lack of knowledge, interest, or consistency in the execution of his office may ultimately have the effect of shrinking the presidency back to a more historically typical size. That might be a desirable outcome, but the means of achieving it have already taken a toll. For Trump has also repeatedly diminished not only the reputation of his own office, but that of anyone who would serve him. On his first day in office, he turned Sean Spicer, a veteran, generally well-regarded Republican press spokesman, into a walking punchline because of his insistence that the crowd at Trump's inaugural was the largest ever. He has reduced Rex Tillerson, once the all-powerful head of one of the world's largest multinational corporations, to a supplicant Secretary of State, whose diplomatic initiatives the president summarily, and publicly, overrules. And he has deployed John Kelly, an admired 4-star Marine general, as a partisan political surrogate in a dispute over his handling of the death of a fallen soldier. Far from draining the swamp of Washington, as he promised, Trump and his administration have persisted in business as usual, or business unusual, in his case, in which he has personally profited from his namesake hotel's lease on a government building just blocks from the White House, on Pennsylvania Avenue. His Commerce Secretary has retained a financial interest in a shipping company with business ties to a Russian oligarch and Vladimir Putin's son-in-law. His Treasury Secretary sought the use of government aircraft for personal travel. A special counsel is investigating his own son-in-law's business dealings with Russia. As he did during his Maverick campaign, Trump seems determined, on a near-daily basis, to test the truth of his assertion that he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and pay no political price. His fellow Republicans, even many of those who once doubted his commitment to party orthodoxy, are sticking by him in the range of 80% support. His sharpest congressional critics, like Senators Jeff Flake and Bob Corker, have opted to retire, rather than face the wrath of his supporters in re-election battles they might lose. House Speaker Paul Ryan, who waltzed up to the edge of Never Trump in the primaries, is now locked arm in arm with the president to pass a tax plan that rewards longtime traditional GOP constituencies. For better or worse, Trump is also testing the truth of Adlai Stevenson's rueful assessment that, in America, anyone can grow up to be president, and that's just one of the risks we take. For Democrats, that's proved a special challenge. Trump has so thoroughly upended the norms of political discourse and partisan give-and-take that his would-be adversaries are struggling to find an effective way to counter him. Democrats remain deeply divided, relitigating last year's bitter primary battle between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, and grappling to respond to the concerns of people like the rafts of two-time Barack Obama voters who abandoned the party for Trump. One thing is clear in the face of Trump's raw, unfiltered messages: the usual canned, consultant-driven talking points can't cut it anymore. Moreover, despite Trump's worrisome subtitling on North Korea, and perhaps the starkest threat of nuclear conflict since the Cuban Missile Crisis, the economy is tootling along at near full employment, the stock market is robust, consumer confidence is up, and inflation remains low. And whatever the public's view of Trump personally, roughly half of Americans still say they have confidence in his ability to negotiate favorable trade agreements and make good appointments to the federal courts. The president's mixed signals on immigration depending on the day or the hour, either for or against the so-called dreamers brought here as children, have alternately demoralized his base and confounded would-be Democratic allies in Congress, and left his bottom line, in this and so many other matters, ever-shifting and unclear. The laws of conventional political physics would suggest that, absent a major turnaround in his poll standings, Trump should face an uphill battle for re-election, and would be all but certain to draw one or more serious Republican challengers for his party's renomination. But Trump repeatedly defied such laws all last year, and there is little evidence to suggest that any major figure in his own party will be willing to take him on, much less wrest the GOP leadership away from him. It is the hoariest cliché of the American presidency that the office makes the man. But within days of taking office, Trump left no doubt that the presidency had not changed him one whit. The weeks and months since then have only confirmed that it is Trump himself who is changing the office. Leave aside his administration's substantive rollbacks in environmental protection and financial regulation, and its curtailment of administrative support and insurance subsidies for healthcare, all of which have been real enough, and will have real impact in the months and years to come. The big question now is just how far Trump is willing to go to continue remaking the institution of the presidency in his own mercurial image, and at just what price.